Welcome, everyone. Good evening. I'm John Claypool, Executive Director of the Center for Architecture and the AIA Philadelphia chapter. I'm pleased to welcome you to the 28th Louis I. Kahn Memorial Lecture. The Center is pleased to continue a wonderful tradition in remembrance of a rich legacy of education and architectural leadership of our former mentor, Louis I. Kahn. We're really delighted with the wonderful turnout this evening. Please greet all your friends and acquaintances and make new ones. Your enthusiasm is a testament to our interest in excellence in design. Your participation this evening is benefiting the Charter High School for Architecture and Design, a legacy project of the AIA chapter in 1999, opening in 2000 as part of the convention, and the continuing education programs of the Center for Architecture. We also have this evening, and some of you may have noticed, a book by Steven Holl, some of which have been signed, and we're delighted to sell you one upon you exiting the auditorium. Events of this type are never possible without extraordinary and generous contributors and sponsors. The Diener Brick Company has been a long-time lead sponsor of this event, and we wish to express our deepest appreciation for their continued financial support. Ryan Rutherford and his team are with us this evening, and thank you. Also, we're pleased to welcome additional sponsors at the Salk level. You'll catch the reference. Clemens Construction and Jacobs Global Buildings. And at the Richards level, we have the Aegis Property Group, Aileen and Brian Roberts, L.F. Driscoll, and the Neubauer Family Foundation. We really appreciate people and organizations supporting this effort. Now, to begin our evening, I'd like to welcome the President of the Center for Architecture, Bob Sue, to make the introduction. Bob.
Thanks, John. Good evening. Wow, what a crowd. And I know why you guys are all here. So I'm delighted to introduce this year's Louis I. Kahn Memorial Lecturer, Steven Holl. Considered one of America's most important architects, Steven is recognized for his ability to blend space and light with great contextual sensitivity. He's particularly adept at poetically integrating new projects into culturally and historically important sites. Steven is a graduate of the University of Washington and pursued architectural studies in Rome in 1970. In 1976, he attended the Architectural Association in London and established Steven Holl Architects in New York City. Steven has been recognized by his peers with architecture's most prestigious awards and prizes. He received the AIA Gold Medal in 2012 and the Reba Jenks Award in 2010. In 2003, he was named Honorary Fellow of the Royal Institute of British Architects, RIBA. And in 2002, the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum honored him by awarding him the National Design Award in Architecture. In 2001, Time magazine declared him America's best architect for his buildings that satisfy the spirit as well as the eye. This is just a small sampling of the awards he and his firm have garnered over the years. Steven Holl is a tenured professor at Columbia University, Graduate School of Architecture and Planning, and he's published numerous texts, including the one, Urban Hopes, which is signed copies are at the lobby. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our honored guest this evening, Steven Holl.
Thank you for all the accolades. This is an amazing coincidence, this room, and you will see why when I walked in here tonight I was so thrilled to be lecturing inside of a spherical room. This talk is particularly an honor to me because it has deep connections to my own life. Back in 1973, when I was going to visit the different graduate schools that I was going to attend, Harvard and Columbia, I decided against it. And I came to Philadelphia at 1501 Walnut Street, which we hope to save, and interviewed in Kahn's studio and was hired as an intern. I decided I was going to do that instead of go to graduate school. But then on March 21st, 1974, I was on my way to my oral reviews for my architecture exam when Kahn's obituary shockingly appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle. And my reviewers had not yet realized that Kahn had died, so when I brought that newspaper to the interview, we spent 2 hours talking about the importance of Kahn's work, and I passed my oral exam. And then I was lost for a year, and I was working in Lawrence Halpern's office in San Francisco, and Alvin Boyarsky came through and said, "Why don't you come to the AA?" He loved my portfolio, so I went to the AA in London and lived in London in 1976, and well, that's another story. So this talk I made up, and I finished it. I kept changing it, and Janine, who helps me all the time, her hair was pulling out because I was changing it exactly 15 minutes before getting on the train. So I hope the last slide is in here. And it's something I'm interested in that I'm connecting to some of the early projects of Kahn. And I want to just start, here's a sentence: explorations of in. The thing containing is not the thing contained. The idea of this, really, I was working in these directions, but the idea comes from my friend Andrew McNair giving me the book of Peter Sloterdijk called Spheres. And if those of you know this philosopher, who's very active in Germany at the moment, his 3-volume, 2,500-page Spheres is basically a bookend to Heidegger's Being and Time. It's an interesting read. It's very complicated, but basically it boils down to, the first book is really about microspheres, individuals, the discovery of the self as a kind of bubble. And he makes the argument that none of us are alone. There's something about not just twins, but about our existence that have to do with this idea of the microsphere. The second volume is really about the explorations of the political world, the globe, as we see it today. All previous elements about globalization have suffered short-sightedness, according to Sloterdijk. And globalization really begins with the ancient Greeks, with the idea of the orb. So he's taking on completely the problems of the climate problems, and all the kind of problems that we're all faced with in a philosophical way. And it's interesting that right before I came here yesterday, I got an email from my colleague at Columbia, Michael Bell, because we're always speaking about matter and light. And this was just off the internet yesterday, that turning light into matter might finally be possible. And it reminds me of that wonderful statement that I always doubted of Kahn years ago when he said, "I sense light as the giver of all presences, and material as spent light." So anyway, I think if we live long enough, we'll see many of his statements as prophetic. And the last volume, which I don't know anything about, is called Foam. And it's about the poetics of plurality, which I haven't read yet because it's only in German and French. So I want to now segue into the work of Kahn, which I feel relates to this explorations of in. And so, he had this sentence, which I love: architecture does not exist. What exists is the spirit of architecture. And I think this is a good image for that, because here he is with the FDR Memorial, and you can see FDR's grandson on the left and Governor Harriman on the right, but you can see that the design at this point still has a stainless steel cylinder. And we know, oops, that slide is sideways. Anyway, it's finished now, and all of you who get to see this great monument, the FDR Memorial, be sure to look through the slices of the 35,000 ton gigantic granite blocks because the polished inner surfaces are amazing. Another project which I think really is about explorations of inn is the Goldenberg House from 1959. And you can see in these drawings basically the struggle to find what is an inside, what is an outside. In a way, there's a kind of, let's say, plastic a kind of horizon that doesn't ever get quite solved. And the house was never built. But I think these ideas, this is trying to, in a way, get at a point of meditation on this problem of inn. Also, in the Rochester, the Unity Church in Rochester, First Unitarian Church, Rochester, New York, 1958, and I think he worked on that until 69. You can see, especially in this first drawing, the condition of corridor, the condition of school, the ambulatory, but this question mark in the center, and he calls this the realization or the form drawing. And he says this is not a design. But I contend that this is my thesis, this problem of the explorations of inn. And in the first design, you can see the translation. And then this was the program. There would be a school, there would be a sanctuary, but no, he doesn't want that. By the way, Frank Lloyd Wright did that in the Unity Church in Oak Park. The school is separate from the sanctuary. But even in the final building, you can see this issue is still open because there's an escape all the way around the sanctuary. And by the way, Kahn, as far as I could decipher from my own readings, was not religious and believed that you needed to be able to escape when someone was, moralistically speaking, at the podium. So I hope some of you can find exits out here, because he designed this place so that you could escape in any different direction. But I think also in Rochester, that inside is an outside. It's all done in concrete block, and the underside is concrete. And in a certain sense, you feel you're outside. And certainly the way the light comes down, it's like coming down from a cloud. Out of these 4 gigantic cubic monitors, this glareless light washes down in an amazing way. Certainly in the Dominican Mother House, there's an exploration of what is the inn of this project. By the way, I was involved with Lars Muller in sponsoring the publication. This book, it's an enormously wonderful book. It's only about this project, and it's about all the number of drawings that Kahn went through to reach the project, which was never built. You can see here, even in the beginning, you can see the sense of the space being central, the sense of the void space being the central, let's say, aim. But even here, the calculations of the areas, and then there's the budget, $3.4 million. Maybe that's why it never got built. And there's more than 900 drawings. And the book can't record all of them, but there's more than 900 drawings in the effort to reach this project. And I think that drawing is a form of thought. So these are not, this is something that we're losing today. Our young people don't draw. They turn the computer on and the computer draws for them, and the computer has a setup so that certain lines come out and certain things come out, and then you don't copy anything, you don't retrace things, you just hit the, kind of whatever, copy button, and it gets copied. So when you're doing in this book, when you look at these drawings, when you understand that the retracing, the rethinking, the meditating on the process of design, that's really something I think we need to look at as something that gets lost in the current tendency. I say that as a teacher of architecture at Columbia. And, there's many versions of this project, wonderful versions. I think it's one of the seminal projects, and yet it wasn't built. Built, a great project, which is also about this condition, is the Salk Institute. And you can see in the very early drawings the essence of what I'm trying to get at with this talk. You can see inside, outside, a wall. And I equals inside and O equals outside. Consider the inside and the outside as though they were separated from each other. Now, how can you do that? And then, you see this this thinking, this process, and especially here where you have space and you have outside, 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 and inside, or here you have outside, space, 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 outside, outside, outside. This is all the beginning of this project, which I contend are really deeply explorations of in. It's not about design like we do it today. This is a deeper meditation, which I think we would be well to return to, especially now. And, again, the project doesn't bring itself to a conclusion very rapidly. There's many, many different schemes. And here you have the scheme, and I think this is 1963, I'm not sure which year, but you see the water that he thought was so important, but it's out here. It's a trough on the outside. And you see it's called the noisy fountain, number 11, and the quiet fountain, number 12. I mean, at San Diego, we need water, we need precipitation, the sort of respect for water, that's very important. But it's not central, and that's not correct yet. It's not there yet. So finally, and I'm not going to do a whole lecture, I mean, there's the model of that scheme, and luckily he kept going because he wasn't there yet. And we have now one of the most amazing spaces on the entire West Coast. And you must go there when the sun is shining on the ocean, and this is not quite the slide I need, but this is as close as I could get. The sun is shining on the ocean, and those ripples of sunlight connect with the trough of water that's slicing through the main courtyard. And you get this sense of the infinite, the sense of the oceanic. And another project you see this exploration of in is the Fort Wayne Fine Arts Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And here, the beginning, the drawings are almost a calligraphic statement of this search. A kind of, let's say, a question really about in and the object and space. Parallel to this, and this is something I think is, you're influenced by your atmosphere, what's going on in the world at the time. And Albers was doing this series of drawings where if you turn your head and flip your eye, the inside turns into the outside. Actually, this one I have over my mantle, and I swear to God, it's alive, because if you look at it one way, it turns inside out, and you look at it another way, it turns the other way. The inside and the outside reverse themselves. So in our work, I want to try to find the connection to this explorations of in, and I trace it to the thinking that we did for the Porta Vittoria project in 1986, which was a kind of triennale exhibition project where we wanted to reject the current tendency to make typology and morphology the only way to think about how to do a city, how to make a new city plan. And this is 1986, Leon Creer, the ghost of Aldo Rossi, and we said, no, we want to look at the city in section. And then I said, there are 4 types of architecture: under the ground, in the ground, on the ground, and over the ground. Those are the primary relations. So you have a kind of between, under, in, on, over, and a within, under, in, on, over, and a complicated, let's say, complex relations where you have an in. Each one has an in. So these were a kind of prepositional charts on which we did our Porta Vittoria project, which later show up in the larger urban works in China, and especially in the Fukuoka, in the Makuhari project in Japan, which I'm not going to show tonight because I have to focus this talk on smaller pieces so that I can make the point. So I thought, where's the first place that I could see this in our work? And that I saw it not in my father's house, which is a wooden house in Seattle, in Manchester, Washington, that my 93-and-a-half-year-old father still lives in, and he built half of it. And I don't publish that because it wasn't yet architecture. But I think this is a pool house and sculpture studio that's now been torn down. But the idea was there was an old stone wall on the site, and we made what we call walls within walls. There was a courtyard 55 feet square, and it was just a sculpture studio upstairs and a pool changing room downstairs. It's 400 square feet, but this is a 55-foot square. But this, for me, this idea of walls within walls is already this exploration of that this project is more than the object than an object of a building. And I think parallel, right around the same time, we began the text for anchoring, which I still hold as part of our work and part of the ideas that we've been developing. And just a few sentences from this text, written in 1988. Architecture and site should have an experiential connection, a metaphysical link, a poetic link. An ideal exists in the specific, an absolute in the relative. And I say, at that point, I said, there's no longer a grand narrative. There's no longer modernism. Postmodernism, to me, was a dead end in the first place. Deconstruction was invalid. So at this point, I say that this manifesto of anchoring, place takes over from time. Space is now time. So in a certain sense, when you think about when you travel around the world and you visit certain places, they're outside of our time frame. They really are in another time. And I think as an architect working internationally in the different places that we have the opportunity to work, that's been a very useful manifesto, that we're not trying to take some grand narrative from one site to the next. And I think a lot of architects today work that way. Some of them are my good friends that I even went to school with, like Zaha Hadid. But basically, that's the idea that there's a certain grand narrative, a certain language that you take from one site to the next, regardless of the place. And this is just the opposite. Our manifesto is really the opposite of that. So this project, for me, is the most, and I'll have to do this lecture again when I have more time to make it better. But out of all the work that we've done, I thought this house has more to do with explorations of in than anything that we've done so far. And basically, it's a house and gallery. It's for a shipping company in Korea called Daeang Shipping Company. They wanted a guest house, a place for exhibitions, a place for musical concerts, on a very beautiful site in Gwangnam, for those of you who are from Korea. And I struggled with, I did 30 different designs, and at a certain moment, I threw them all away, and I said, I need another way to get into this project. And I began with a piece of music. And I began with this sketch from a piece called Symphony of Modules, which was by a Hungarian composer called István Inhalt, and it was done in 1967, but it was never played because the orchestra was too big. So that was the beginning point where the staff lines become skylights, and it's called Beams of Light Symphony of Modules. And a sheet of water divides the three pavilions and provides the sort of datum, the platform, from which these relationships of inside and outside are established. And down below is a gallery system, and that's where the concerts take place. And you can see the simplicity of this water sheet and the three pavilions, and everything's connected down below. And there's the section where you see that sheet of water slices through, and then these conditions of section are connected. And I have this little video which I think explains this better than I can, because you can see the movement of the light. One of the reasons I like this project is underneath of the water is the foundation of the art. His desire for art. So the sense of music and poetry and painting and sculpture is a foundation that's merging, with the idea of domestic life. So that's a kind of mini utopia. So there's two things. There's the idea that drives the design, which was that musical diagram and the notion of music and the sheet of water and the light. But the most important thing is the body moving through space and the actual feeling that you get.
For me, architecture really has to be experienced. You have to walk through it. You have to sense the sound. Here we have an acoustic. We have a reverberation time in this gallery of about 1.6 seconds, which is like an old church. And that's because of the stone floor, a honed stone floor, and the hard surfaces and the organization of the proportions. The first moment of entry really is ascending this half stair. And here you're in the center of the composition. You're in the entrance pavilion, the middle of the three, but your view is to the outside. So the excitement really is you're inside, but the focus is the outside. And that outside unifies these three pieces in the feeling of the water, the sheet of water going through. The body moving through space is at 5 feet 6 inches. That's where you experience everything. It's very important that this ramp bring you down gently, and you see the horizon of the water start to lift, and you can sense the natural light coming through every cut from the pavilions above. There are secondary cuts in the spaces of the buildings, and that light traveling through, coming to the main gallery below. And you can see this sort of active light from the sun and the wind blowing in the water above. So here we are without any electric lights on. It's perfect. This is the perfect light. We should just cut their power off, you know? Then they won't misuse it. Now, this is the way this place should be, you know? It's all in natural light. Every single square inch of this project has been designed so that you don't have to turn the lights on during the day. This sense of this wall, this puncture in that angular sweep, all of that is related to the sense of that floor in that room being a sheet of light. This is that sheet of light that's in the same plane as the sheet of water that unifies all the pavilions. So we have this sense that there's a datum line, a kind of horizon right above the gallery. And then the second datum, all these pavilions are the same height, is where this musical score and these staff lines modulate the light in the space. As the time of day changes, every day changes, and every season changes. So these dancing lines always activate the space. Like the tradition of Korean gardening, the idea of a pond of water is not contained. It connects out into the neighborhood, into the landscape, into the mountain beyond. So this water slot, it's intentional, that feeling of connection going out to the community and to the landscape and to this adjacent landscape. To me, the detail is very important. You know, just the moment where the steel comes down and meets a bracket on the floor, where wood joints to granite. The experience of architecture is a tactile thing. It comes down to the space, the light, the materiality, and where you touch it, where you feel it. This is a rarity today.
That's really exciting to me, that architecture can change the way you feel, like music. You know, when you're playing a piece of music, if you're sad, or it can bring you into another world. And that kind of idea of architecture being something that changes you, and that's why I say it's like a miniature utopia. The place becomes a place by a world by itself.
And just to kind of underline that idea further is that this inside that we're in here, this inside, when I'm speaking about that being an outside, there's also the other inside beyond. So there's basically 3 layers of this condition of the inside and the outside. But I want to just touch on this one point about music, because Kahn and Frank Lloyd Wright talked about the analogy of music and architecture, which I think is really important. And Kahn says in 1969, "I constantly refer to music in referring to architecture, because to me there is no great difference. When you dig deep enough into the realm of not doing things, but simply thinking about what you want to do, that all the various ways of expression come to the fore. To me, when I see a plan, I must see the plan as if it were a symphony of the realm in spaces in the construction of light." Another project, I think, in fact, this is our first project in China, and it's the only thing I'm going to show in China. We have an office in Beijing, and we're doing, so well, actually, the last project I'm going to show that I've never shown before. This is the first, and this is a museum, and we based the museum on perspective, on the sense of space. Because in Western perspective, in the 16th century, you really have the vanishing point, you have the whole legacy of Brunelleschi. And the Chinese knew about vanishing points, but they rejected using them. They used parallel perspective because of the scrolls. So the paintings continue to use these parallel perspectives, which don't have a vanishing point. So my idea was to make this building about these two kinds of spatial cultural aspects. So the beginning courtyard, all below, would be warped spaces in parallel perspective. And as you move up through the building, you go out, and then you turn into a gallery, which is hovering like a lantern, and it shines back at the city in the distance, the city of Nanjing. So you can see the idea of these courts. They're all in bamboo-formed concrete, a material that we found on the site, very large bamboo. So we're connecting again to that condition of the site. And there you see the scale of the bamboo. You have the sense of scale when you walk up to the building because you see the imperfections of the bamboo and how that begins to be a texture. That's just a formwork lining of the concrete. And then as you gradually move up, the distant view is carried. There's the main entrance. Moving up through, this was the opening day, some of the exhibits there. Moving up through, and then through the upper gallery, and then finally out into the distant view of the city of Nanjing, which also was a walled city, was the seat of one of the dynasties. Nanjing is a very important city that way. So there's a sense of the urban, but there's also a sense of this condition of being in, and being in this kind of parallel perspective space. And at the time we were building this, they were in the city of Nanjing, they were doing some very terrible condominium projects by some foreign architects, and they were tearing down hutongs, which we've never done in China. And I said, let's save those bricks. Let's take those hutong bricks and bring them into our courtyard, because we're connecting to this ancient sense of space. And we pave our whole courtyards in recycled hutong bricks from what was getting destroyed in the Nanjing city. You see, so there are huge amounts of these bricks, which we practically got for zero. And then later on, they're growing the grass between them. A project that's under construction now, I'm very excited about, that I've been working on for 7 years, not very far from here, at Princeton, a place where Anna McNair went to school and saw Lou Kahn speak 2 times, right? Which years? 70 what? 67 and 68. And he always wore a blue suit, a dark blue suit, right? And where was it made? Langrocks made the suits. And then everybody at the school went to get suits in Langrocks because Kahn had these suits, right? He has one on right now. If you want to see after the lecture, come and look at Andrew McNair. He has one of the Langrock suits on that Kahn ordered at Princeton. So I'm very happy to work at Princeton. I mean, there's such a history at this place. And this was Shirley Tigman's pet project, to bring a performing arts, a center for the arts. Peter Lewis, bless his soul, he gave $111 million. And this is a wonderful project, which I think relates to this question of explorations of because they were asking for these 3 different programs, but we gave them one building in 3 parts that has a forum underneath. So there's a dance section, which is based on a thing within a thing within a thing. And you see the dance studio, the black box, and the various dance studios are in different materials inside the masonry frame. There's the arts center with a gallery and the poetry section, which is about being embedded, one thing being embedded in another. And then there's the music building, which is just practicing for the hall that's over there. So we have individual practice rooms that are suspended above a collective practice room. And that was the program: theater, dance, music, the arts center, and the forum, which we added, which makes that central space, that void, that public space that's at the center of the project. And you can see everything here that's concrete will have masonry. It's Casota stone and Lecce stone and CNC carved, and that's this public space. And everything in all of our projects actually responds to the golden section. But this project was particular because we had been working on it for so many years, and I just have this natural tendency to bring things into this relation. We checked it, and it was almost right on, the Fibonacci series. 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89. That's 55, this is 89, that's 34, that's 55, that's 34. And that was almost done intuitively. And the notion of seeing in, you see the performance from the central quadrangle, you see down into the performance studio. So there's a sense of being part of what's going on inside these rehearsal and activity rooms. And then in the music building, you have the individual suspended over the collective. So this was one of the main pieces of the program, the orchestral practice, and that has to hold like 150. But then you have the individual practice rooms, and we made them, they're suspended from a concrete frame above, and they're on steel rods, and they're wooden boxes. So they have this feeling almost of a resonant chamber, resonant chambers. There, the big orchestral practice hall, and then the resonant chambers, which are suspended on these steel rods, acoustically separated from each other. And then they'll have a life. You'll be able to see those through the glass walls on either side, in the quadrangle and outside the building, and also at night, because people will be practicing there at night. So there'll be this life of this sort of entrance building. And I'm very happy to say it's finally under construction after 7 years and, let's say, more than 150 presentations. And this building also went through some 70 presentations in Glasgow. Very difficult. It's the Glasgow School of Art. It just opened on the 9th of April. This is probably the most important building in the UK of 1904 by Mackintosh, the Glasgow School of Art. And this was a competition. And basically, we're having to double the size, more than double the size of the school, to give studio space for ceramics, painting, sculpture, jewelry making, design, all of the arts in the Glasgow School of Art. So it's a much needed facility. And you can see there an aerial view. There's the relation of the Mackintosh and the new building. Central to Glasgow, and our beginning was to do an analysis, and this was a competition, so this was part of the process of the competition, to do an analysis of all the different kinds of light that Mackintosh employed. And there were really a lot. You know, the different studios, it's such a vocabulary, amazing vocabulary of different kinds of light. And it was an exciting thing to begin with. I mean, it's such a rich building, it's amazing. And so after our analysis, we did a series of concept drawings where we thought that the whole building could be based on driven voids of light, which I'll show you what they are in a minute, and the collision of those with great studio spaces that are 15 meters square, that are organized around what we call the abrasive collisions passage, a kind of meandering route through the building that creates relationships between the students in the different departments. Intentional, let's say, confrontations and bringing together of this school. And there you see the section and the idea of actually the reversal of the structural relationship. The building we are making is in what I call complementary contrast, whereas Mackintosh's building is thick skin, stone and bearing, thin bones, steel and wood. Our building is thick bones, all concrete structure, and very thin skin, recycled double glass in a matte finish. So they're in this kind of complementary, opposite relation to each other. Here's just a very short piece of the construction and this idea of the driven voids. Uh-oh. We have digital failure.
I always love the way that when you come in, you're drawn to the light already. The natural light is already part of the experience because there's a certain condition of the light dropping in this large stairwell that just brings you up. And that was the beginning point for us, just to analyze all the natural light in the Mackintosh building and then convert that into another geometry. It's a cubist version of the Mackintosh. When we were analyzing this building, one of the things that we discovered or felt was the power of these vertical voids of light, and we transformed that into the driven voids of light. So this is basically this is the moment of let's say, imagination that gets transformed into the driven voids, which begin the process of our concept. And we transform that into the structure, the bringing in of the light, the exhaling and inhaling of the air, and marking time. So they're doing 4 things. Okay, that's kind of let's see if we can skip this. So basically, that's the sort of heart of the building and the heart of the idea. And I think when I talk about explorations of in, here we're talking about the structure, the light, the condition of the air, because it's all naturally ventilated. This building is a super green building. And the condition of the movement, so marking of the time of the people moving through the building. And again, all the proportions according to golden section relationships, both in the Macintosh, which we discovered, and you can find them very easily, and in our building. And the relation of an existing building that we saved, the assembly building, that was also a fight. We wanted to save this corner urban building and just float our building over it. It was very easy structurally. They thought that this should be torn down, and we said, no, that's really part of the texture of the city. And it was the student drinking place, and they have it as a bar now, and that's what it was before. So it's also their escape from the rest of the school, and I think they love it, by the way. And this is the complementary contrast in materials. You see the Macintosh in that wonderful steel, complicated steel work, and the great yellow-green stone, and our recycled glass. So the relationship between the old and the new. And there you see the assembly building saved, and that's the drinking place of the students, and these are the great studios and classrooms. And that would be another lecture. I mean, I really believe firmly that this is a kind of emergency moment in architecture, that every building needs to be super, super green, and we make all of our projects that way. Even that house that I showed you in Korea is totally geothermally heated and cooled, which took me a lot of arguing. So every single one of our projects, they take the highest level of energy responsibility that we can. But I don't think that's architecture. Architecture is something more than that. This building just opened on the 9th of April, and I really hope if you get to Glasgow, you have a chance to see it. The press has absolutely run me over the coals. It's amazing, and I won't even go into it, but I'm very proud of the building, and I think the students speak for it better than the press. And the building is basically a black and white building. In a Macintosh building, there's many colored glass elements all over, sprinkled all over. So we decided at the entrance we wanted to make complementary contrast to the Macintosh, and we decided to do this with the artist Martin Boyce, who's a Turner Prize winner and a Glasgow graduate, and he was really, hesitant at the beginning. He said, "Yeah, but Steven, I don't work in colored glass." So I convinced him, and he did a great project. And it's the whole entrance, the space of the entrance, but what really takes off is when the sun shines through it and how it just takes this whole wonderful place and really animates it for the seasons and during, in time. And now it's fully functioning. The students have moved in already. There are the driven voids. You can see always peeks into other studios. It animates your passage when you move from one level to another. And you can see violin concerts. Robbie Coltrane at the entrance called these not driven voids, he called them light flutes because they were using them for music.
and they do sort of color compositions in them. And this is from the opening, if this works. Uh-oh. Where's my technician? This is a really beautiful piece of music that was written especially for the opening by a composer that graduated from Glasgow School of Art. And can we get this to play? Is the technician around here? No chance. I just like this piece of music so much, I want to hear it. It's very short. It's like 15 seconds. And just have one more project here. These are 42 students dressed especially in black, singing a song composed for the opening. Can we go back to the talk now? Sorry. There was a smaller clip that was embedded in the lecture, and that was the full clip, so we don't want that. The last project is a project that I have not shown yet to anyone, and I'm very excited about it. It's also related to this explorations of in. And it's a project for a necropolis in Taiwan called Chinol-Pasan. It's a very interesting problem for an architect. I mean, already 10,000 people are buried there. There are a number of pavilions. There's a 10,000 Buddha pagoda. There's a Church of Light pagoda. There are private burial arrangements. There's the original building. And each one of those have urn shelving. The cremation occurs in the city of Taipei. And so this project is really about the memorial space and about all the ceremonial activities that go on. different times of the year. And in the spring, it's a tradition in China, they come, kind of the cleaning of the graves. So the whole family comes, and as many as 5,000 people can come to these ceremonies that happen in the spring. And there's another series that happen in the fall. So there needs to be accommodation for 100 monks that take part in these ceremonies. And then they've decided to build an arrival hall for this complex because it's going to be enlarged. So our charge is to do the arrival hall and the new, what I call oceanic pavilion. So the arrival hall will have a hotel with 21 rooms, 100 monks' cells, and 2 small museums and a special ceremonial hall. And you can see here the site is down here, and there's the existing condition, which is, it's like Amalfi, but it's 10,000 people, and it's really quiet there. The owner lives there on the site in a house that he built. He's a very amazing, strange man that there's about 100 people that live there full time in a dormitory. And I think this is one of the most important burial sites in Taiwan. But he believes that art is central, and he's always wanting to merge the landscape with artworks. So I had a big struggle I've never done a memorial cemetery. I've been to Brion Vega, Carlos Scarpa, which I love, and I've been to the Stockholm of, I'm forgetting the name of it now. Yeah, and I mean I've visited a lot of these places, and I think the idea of making a sacred space, but this is for all denominations. This is not just Buddhist, maybe Buddhist, a combination of every other religion, and I had a big struggle. There are more than 100 schemes before we reached something that I felt that was strong, and that had to do with the universal feeling of a circle. Say intersecting a circle, when it becomes a sphere, the spherical intersection becomes something else, becomes something much more mysterious. And you can understand all the possibilities, whether it's centripetal or centrifugal or rotational or axial, or the condition of movement that can actually reverse itself in one sphere as it reaches another sphere. So this became a kind of a morphology, I thought, that had something central to do with the possibility of this place. And so the arrival hall is a sculpture garden. This is all a sculpture garden. There'll be sculpture located here, and these are ponds. So that's a green deck, and we're going to go look inside of that. And then the main building is called the Oceanic Pavilion, which is here. So there's the arrival hall, which you arrive here, and the cars drop you there. And this is the Oceanic Pavilion, and my idea was, this is the Pacific Ocean, so this incredible ocean horizon view, to bring that view back in via this water, this layer of water on top. And then these spherical intersections become the main body of the building. So in the arrival hall, there's 2 museums, and there's the hotel, and there's the first kind of drawings, and then this notion of a very large space which utilizes these intersecting circulatory possibilities to bring you up to a tunnel to the other pavilions and to a museum. So this is the main entrance. And this idea that the light would come from the sculpture garden above, and the sculptures would be these colored glass elements, would actually act as a kind of stela in the garden above and bring light down to the floor. And that's a relief model. And you can see that the sort of the condition of this light coming from the sculpture garden, from these stela that are in the sculpture garden, will paint the walls and the space. These are just study models. This is basically, the client hasn't even seen these particular views yet. I hope it doesn't get back to them that I'm showing it before them. There are these colored lights that bring to the arrival hall. These are the sculpture garden. There'll be sculpture here that isn't here. And these reflecting pools are related to the existing building, the Hall of 10,000 Buddhas. And there you see the Oceanic Pavilion, which is our main charge. And in this building, I'm exploring this notion of these spherical spaces intersecting. And I got very excited about that as a possible spatial exploration that becomes tenuous and asks questions about what is inside, where's the center, and how the body moves through these spaces. And you can see that they become the passages to the urn shelving. There's something like 190,000 ash boxes on urn shelving in this building. So as you move from one area to another, that's basically, it's a sacred space for urn shelving and for these activities that happen on these different days of the year. And so the kind of condition of movement is related to the spherical space, as is the condition of light coming in. So these are pictures of some of the ceremonies. There's some of the monks. These are the special tablets, which have the special wishes of the families. They have to be accommodated along these walls. Here's one of the ceremonies. You can see there's going to be 1,000 people here, and there are the urn shelving. That's forever. This building has to be forever. It's not a temporary building. This is forever, and it has to be built that way. So it's a great client. And then, the idea of variety of different, great client. It is a great client because they do respect architecture. They want architecture. They want this building to somehow be a sacred space. And I think somehow when I'm really happy that we found a way into the project, because when I look back at the early schemes, I would have never been able to do the building. They were just terrible schemes. My studio is full of all these really ugly models, and I think people were laughing at me that I will never be able to do this project. But I feel really happy that the client has accepted the design now, and now it's the details. Different types of urn shelving, radial, circular, orthogonal, that give a variety of places, and they're accessed by these spherical intersections. So now we're talking about not putting any glass in this building. The arrival hall will have glass, but this building would be only made in hinoki wood and white concrete. That'll be, some cases, post-tension, but it will have just this natural, it's the structure and it's the circulation. And then I had this idea of some levitational urn shelvings, which would actually go up on ramps that stop in midair. And they loved that idea. They said, oh, those will be very expensive. Those are more expensive. And then, this is just in the development stages now, but I'm very excited about the possibility of this project because of these relationships of space. And also of the ocean in the distance. That's what we call it, the Oceanic Pavilion. In Freud's book, Civilization and Its Discontents, he describes the feeling was oceanic. And what is a religious feeling that's non-denominational? Maybe that's a key. This statement of Freud in Civilization and Its Discontents. And I'm trying for that in the feeling of this Oceanic Pavilion. The relation to the sort of vastness, the emptiness, which is a comforting thing in a certain way. It's the mystery of the ocean and the mystery of the distance and the mystery of the beyond. And then they asked me, after the first presentation, so what are the meanings? What are the meanings of these circles? So then we went back and made a more literal presentation. I said, well, in Chinese, and this is true, there are many meanings, because in ancient China, the square means the earth, and the round means heaven. Therefore, the Temple of Heaven is round. If you've been to Beijing, the Temple of Heaven is round. Burial mounds are round. Squares in temple construction relate to the earth. In the I Ching, you also have the condition of square and earth, heaven as round. In a mandala, you have these same relationships. In fact, you can find it through all different religions. In the Borromenian rings, you have in European history the relation of these ring spaces, these spaces of interlocking rings. And I think that this condition then has some universal way of interpreting. But it became a language. When we put the spheres together, being able to move from one sphere to the next, it became a kind of, let's say, an architectonic and spatial language. And that was the drawing. I said it's almost like if you could think of, this going into the beyond, like going into outer space, like you would move through planets, like the Earth, like the Moon, like Jupiter, like beyond, the space beyond. And my friend Guy Nordenson, who's the engineer, he said, oh, it reminds me of a story from Dostoevsky, from the brothers Karamazov. That's the last great novel by Dostoevsky. It speaks of the necessity of faith and its impossibility, for those who don't remember that. There's a man who died who wanted to know the road to heaven. And a sage by the roadside said, it's about 1,000,000 miles, 1,000,000 years walk in that direction. And the man said, what? 1,000,000 years? That's ridiculous. The man said, so he waited about 1,000 years, and then he began to walk in that direction. So anyway, that's my talk. And I wasn't happy to end with Dostoevsky, so I made a ridiculous manifesto. This manifesto was made at 12:30 in New York. So this manifesto is from the 21st of May. So what are we trying to do? And it's an experiment. It's explorations of in. So to study an architecture freed from the purely objective. From the origins of architecture, we explore the in, to go back to the deepest origins. In goes to the elemental core of architecture. In, space, all space is sacred space. The architecture of in dominates space via space. And 5, intrinsic in is an elemental force of sensual beauty, the notion of beauty that I think needs to be recovered in architecture. Certainly, the internet and the way we make things today somehow erases it. In is useless, but in the future, it will be used. Purpose will find in. And then the last is, and this is the most difficult, in is like the plane of pure immanence of Deleuze driving toward the absolute architecture. Thank you. Questions?
Not yet. I'm going to give you a prize first. Oh, thank you very much.
Do you want me to sit down or stay up here?
No, stand up here.
Stand up here.
I'm just a dummy here. Just doing it.
Amazing. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Philadelphia Center for Architecture and AI Philadelphia, we, the presidents, are pleased to present you with the 2014 Louis Kahn I Memorial Medal in honor of your distinguished achievements as an architect and for contributing to the storied legacy of Kahn with your presentation this evening. Congratulations, Steven. I was practically speechless. Now we're going to take some questions and answers.
Right. So, thank you, Stephen. That was terrific. We're going to take some questions, and the process is when I acknowledge you, can you get to a microphone? I think there are people that have roving microphones.
One volunteer in each aisle.
Right? And then give your name and then speak really loudly so that everybody can hear the question. And I'll start from the back. So anybody back there? Can I see somebody? You got to have questions. Right here? Yeah.
Hi. I'm Claudia Lebret, and I I was a student of Stevens a long time ago at Parsons. I
A
do
very
lighting.
long time ago.
We're not that old. Anyway, I do lighting, design, and interior design, and I was thinking about, especially the last project, I was wondering about people coming into those spaces when there's no daylight. I don't know how that building gets used, 20 day and night, but if you can talk a little bit about how you think about the use of artificial lighting in the development of that kind of project, I think that would be fun to hear about.
Yeah, it's in the development stages, so that's a good question because we haven't gotten there yet. And definitely there will be, the employment of LEDs and the highest technology. And one of the things that we are already incorporating is in that sheet of water, there'll be solar PVs about 2 inches below the surface of the water. And Matthias Schuler, our engineer from Stuttgart, from Transolar, has engineered, this will be the largest solar array under a sheet of water. And it's going to power the whole building. There's plenty of surface area. So, and what's nice is, nowadays, of course, the technology is getting pretty advanced. And the water actually works as a kind of lens, helping focus the sunlight on the solar collectors, and actually keeps them clean from dust. So it actually makes it, they perform better than if they were on a roof. So whatever it is, whatever LED lighting that you or somebody else designs and makes this light, it will be all done by the solar power.
Okay. Anybody from the back, and then I'll move up to the front. Question? There you go.
Thank you. Derek Gilman, Drexel University. Mr. Holl, in the Nelson-Atkins gallery, which goes down, were you thinking about in and down? Was in part of your thinking about that rather splendid addition to a remarkable building?
That building really, I probably should have put it in this talk because, the brief on that project, that was a competition. And there were 6 architects, and the brief was you had to add on to the north of the existing building. And I mean, we said this was going to destroy the north elevation of the 1937 building. And because they said you can't disturb the landscape, you were not allowed to go on the side that we went. Of course, we broke the rules in the competition, and we went into the landscape, right, in, down. And when we could do that and put the lenses up, we could connect back to the existing building below that plaza level, below ground, and found an entrance that's not being used and cut a wall, a kind of Gordian knot between the two, and it made a beautiful connection between the new and the old. But the way I convinced them that we could break the rules is when I presented this, and we got to present in person, and that's very important in a competition because people probably can't read the drawings and they don't exactly understand the intention. So I said, I apologize, I broke the rules. But on your facade, carved in stone on your facade, it says, the soul has more need for the ideal than for the real. And I said, that's how I got the courage to break the rules.
Anybody else? Yes. There.
The more that, I'm Scott, an architect, the more that architects can accurately and precisely draw renderings of their projects photorealistically, the more clients become locked into this idea that everything is known, that as it's developed and unfolds, there'll be no discoveries. And I was wondering if your watercolor process enables you to have them believe in the essence of the project without locking into it as an image. And I was wondering if we could talk about that.
Yeah, I think that the technique that unfortunately, the moment that we're occupying now is the technique is destroying design. The technique is way advanced to the thinking of the architect. And the clients are not sophisticated enough to see that any student coming out of school can make a rendering of a building with all the glass and people with balloons out in front. And it's not designed yet. And this is dangerous. This is really, you know, our cities are going to be full of buildings half-baked because of the technology that we have at our hands. It's really unfortunate. And I try to avoid those types of, I mean, we use the computer 100%. We have a 3D printer. I make my watercolor diagrams. It goes to the computer drawing. It goes to a 3D printer. We're using all the technology. But I try not to use those eyewash drawings for clients. I try to use a watercolor concept drawing, which doesn't have any detail. It doesn't say that the glass is going to be shiny or whatever. It says basically what the idea is. And I think that's really important, to try to give the process enough time, because what's really disturbing today is that we've shortchanged the design process. And I'm hoping that young people will realize that and return to modeling, because, you know, also in the condition of light. And you saw that those models, those spaces that I was showing you at the end, those spherical spaces, those are model shots. That's not computer drawings. They're adjusted. They're Photoshop cleaned up. Fine. But the condition of light is not, you can't really do it accurately with ray tracing. And there's no computer program that will actually give you the condition, because light falls off the surface by the square root of its source. So the condition is actually a spatial condition. James Turrell taught me that. And I think light is very important to me, so I think we always build models to show conditions of light in space. That's a good question, by the way. That could be a whole lecture, that problem.
Any others? Questions?
Gabor.
Yes. Go ahead. We saved the last.
Yeah.
Gabor Salante, becoming architect. In Philadelphia, from Philadelphia, the question to Steven Holl, Kahn Memorial Lecture. Room becoming the room of architecture. My question to you, Steven, of the whole, indeed, an architect attempts to address the sovereign majesty of the room and its making in the field of the art of architecture. Question: is the art of architecture essentially the act of transformation of the element of nature, the element of space, transforming into the element of mind? Consciousness. Is this act of transformation accomplished by the thoughtful, mindful making of the room, which is the fundamental, foundational element of building for habitation? Is the art of architecture?
These are more than one question, right?
It's the same.
I'm not going to be able to remember.
No, just remember it. Is the art of architecture the act of transformation of space, as if to say protoplasm, the element of nature, into mind stuff psychoplasm, the element of consciousness. Is architecture transformation from protoplasm into mind stuff, into psychoplasm by room making?
See, I read your question before, and I left it back there, backstage, and I began to think about what I was trying to do this evening, and I realized that I'm not focusing on the room. For me, I'm trying to find some new territory. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. And the person that I'm finding this, and Andrew McNair introduced me to this, is Peter Sloterdijk, the philosopher who's working in Germany. By the way, he's born in 1947, same year I was born. And he's been working on these theses, which is beyond the mind-body duality. It's beyond the nature-man duality. It's beyond the machine-man duality, talking about, and it's a coincidence that Deleuze, the last volume that Deleuze wrote before he died, was a volume called The Plane of Pure Immanence. That immanence is this existence that we have now, simultaneous, without dualities. This is very exciting to me. That's why I was very happy to get your question. And I remember the stories of Lou Kahn in the middle of the night, and someone says, Lou, there's someone banging on the door downstairs. This is at 1501 Walnut Street. And they say, there's somebody down there, there's a crazy guy banging on the door. And he leans out the window, he says, it's Gabor, let him in, let him in. So I say, Gabor, thank you, because that's a very good question. Anyway, thank you. Okay, now.
Thank you all for attending this year's Lou Kahn lecture, this wonderful ritual of ours. And I'd like to again thank all our sponsors and the Center for Architecture Kahn's Committee, and very especially William McDowell for putting together this evening's event. I'm still speechless. I'd also like to take a moment to thank John Claypool. As you know, John is retiring, and we'd like to thank him for his years of service to both AIA Philadelphia and the Center for Architecture. John's going to be retiring this summer to do bigger and better things, which is mostly hanging out in Denver with his 4 children and 8 grandchildren. And some of us who were in Denver, he threw a great party over at the convention, and Stephen Kieran, many of us were there. Really got to see an extraordinarily beautiful family, and I could just see that it could almost be soon enough, but really thank you for all your service and for being able to hang out as we do the transition. John has been done incredible service to AIA Philadelphia. Your tireless efforts, particularly in bringing together the Center for Architecture from concept through some dark days of transition, through the go-go years, through the 2000 times, and where we are today, are very important. So you are leaving us with incredible foundations and an incredible house, and we're very, very grateful. And if you could please join me in a round of applause, heartfelt, for John. And finally, thank you, Steven. Here it says I can call you Steven, Mr. Holl, because we haven't met before, but this is a particularly thoughtful address, very, very germane. This is going to be a really a beautiful connection to Kahn and the legacy. We were just incredibly appreciative, and we're honored that you joined us tonight. Thank you very much. So this ends our program. Please continue to visit us over at Design at the Center for Architecture. Design Philadelphia activities are coming up in October. It's going to be the Hillary's Around, the 10th year celebratory events. And this concludes the evening, and safe journeys home. Thank you very much.